media.
Is this Jay?
Yes, it is.
Jay, John Oates here.
John, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thanks so much for calling in. We're so excited about the DVD.
Oh, cool, man. Thank you.
Yeah, I know you're so busy. It's an amazing adventure your life has been. Can you take us back a bit? How did you get the music bug? It seems like music's been a part of your life all that you can remember. What was those early days of getting hooked and wanting to play music yourself?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, as a really little kid, I just sang naturally, and my parents kind of recognized that. And so I had accordion lessons initially when I was about 6, and then I just immediately switched to guitar because I didn't like the accordion. And then I've been playing ever since I've been about 6, and accompanying myself, singing and playing as soon as I could learn a couple chords, really, probably by about 8 or 9. So, that's how I've been, and it's really the only thing I've ever really done other than go to school. So it's been really, it is who I am, I guess. I guess that's the easiest way to put it.
Well, I know you got hooked on, the early, bits of rock and roll. I heard you saw Bill Haley in the comments at 4.
Yeah.
At the museum.
Well, I like to think, when I think back on this whole adventure, is that I seemed to be born at the exact right time. I was born in the late 40s, so I actually remember a time when there was no such thing as rock and roll. My earliest memories are big band music and things like that. So that being said, when rock and roll actually began in the early 50s, I was aware of it. I was aware that something had changed, that something new was happening. And I think that's really pretty amazing. So my life, in a way, my entire life, my life from the time I could have memories, really parallels the evolution of American rock and roll, really. So, I saw it happening. I was listening on the radio, watched it on TV. I experienced it live, and then as I got a bit older and I started going to Philadelphia, I had a chance to see all the great R&B performers play at the Uptown Theater during the heyday of Motown and Stax Volt and everything. I saw all that, and then it was also the birth of kind of the rediscovery of a lot of traditional American music in the 60s, with the folk revival. So I was part of that as well, and I got a chance to experience that firsthand, and at the coffee houses and at the Philadelphia Folk Festival, and actually through some my guitar teacher, who a lot of these early performers like Mississippi John Hurt and Doc Watson, people like that, they stayed at his house, they slept on his couch, and I would go over and hang out. So it was really kind of an amazing time to be growing up and to be able to experience that.
That's an incredible life. I mean, probably at the time it was just, a day-to-day experience, but when you look back, like you say, you can really chart the history of rock and roll, and you've seen it through all the trends. And
yeah, I wish I would have been more aware of it as it was actually happening. I probably would have tried to document it in a better way, but right now it's mostly in my memory. I didn't take pictures or do anything like that in those days. But it was, it was really, this incredibly, fertile time for me as being a young musician, learning, growing, and then experiencing all that at the same time. And that's really kind of informed everything I've done ever since. Even though Daryl and I were pretty much known for our pop success in the 80s, really the roots music was really the part of my life from the very beginning. And sure, it took a back seat during those days when we went on our, doing what Daryl and I did together. But it really never left. It just kind of really took a, like I said, took a back seat. And now that I've been going out and doing solo things, and especially moving to Nashville, I began to re-explore all that stuff. And the more I did, the more comfortable I felt, and the more it was almost like coming home in a way. So my solo work is really basically it's like going back to my past to kind of go forward. And I know that sounds a little bit convoluted, but I think you know what I'm talking about.
Sure. You have such a rich, background to draw from. At what age did you start writing your own songs?
Well, I wrote my first song in 7th grade, but it was I I'd written a poem for English class, and I wrote about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I wrote this poem, and the teacher thought it was good. And at the time, it was the beginning of the folk boom in the early '60s, and I saw people like Bob Dylan and Joan Baez and Dave Van Ronken putting their own word, the idea of putting your own words to a song, and actually the concept of writing a song. All of a sudden, it became. I said, well, hell, if they can do it, why can't I? I can play those same three chords. And that's really what happened. I took that poem, that seventh grade poem, and I think it was because the teacher validated it, because the teacher actually gave me some encouragement, which is something that I never forget, actually, when it comes to mentorship and things like that, because it's important to me. And I think, just maybe that little, it seems like a fairly insignificant comment, to get an A on a paper, or to be told that, hey, this is pretty good. Maybe that was the catalyst that started everything.
Wow. And tell us about meeting Daryl. What was the common ground, and why did you guys click?
Well, when I first met, before I actually met Daryl, I saw his group perform. He had a group called the Temptones. They were basically an a cappella group, and they were patterned after the Temptations. And Daryl was the lead singer. I went to a show called the Freedom Show. It was in Philadelphia somewhere, and his group was like an early open. It was one of those like R&B reviews where there was 12 groups playing. I remember they played early. It was like they were one of the first groups to play. I remember there was a really weird thing that happened. As I recall, the band that was backing them didn't know what they were doing, or they made a mistake, or I can't remember. I remember Daryl just started singing, and then he kind of has perfect pitch, so he just started singing in the right key, and the band kind of fell in behind him. And I thought, wow, these guys are really good, And he was probably he was probably 18, I was probably 17. And then I had put out a record with my band at the exact same time as Daryl's group put out their record. So then we met at we were both hired separately to perform at the same DJ had a teenage dance, and there was a big fight broke out and all this stuff, and we went down the service elevator, and that's kind of how we met. And then a couple of my guys in my band got drafted into Vietnam, and the band was over. Daryl asked me if I'd be a backup guitar player for his group, because they needed a backup band because they were predominantly a vocal group. So I kind of joined his group, semi-officially as a guitar player. And then that group broke up, and Daryl and I just gravitated toward each other.
And what are your greatest memories of that incredible run? Obviously Sarah Smile started it, but Rich Girl just really catapulted you guys. That run with the birth of MTV and so much happened. And what are your greatest memories of that?
All that stuff you mentioned, Sarah Smile, She's Gone, and Rich Girl, this happened, 3 in a row. That happened in the 70s, way before MTV. Then we had a kind of a period of time where we weren't that commercially successful in the late 70s, which led to, of course, the 80s and MTV and all that. MTV, we were friends with the people who came up with the idea. And they came to us early on as they were developing the idea and said, look, we're going to do a music video channel. And we said, what's a video? We didn't know what it was. And they said, well, you just pretend to sing your song and we'll put it on TV. And we thought, oh, this is great. This is a great way to get our, kind of promote ourselves. We saw it purely as a promotional vehicle. We didn't see it in any way as an art form or anything like it would, later become as people got more, as videos became more production oriented and, elaborate. To us, it was just a way of getting out there. So if you look at our earlier videos, it's just us dressed in funny clothes, jumping around in front of a black curtain. And so, it was just one of those things. We were in New York at the right place at the right time.
Now, I know you've been involved with Live Aid and We Are the World. Why is it so important, or what is the power of music to provoke change or make social awareness? And what age did you see that music was more than just the sound?
Well, I think, in the 60s, during the counterculture revolution, and especially during the folk music boom. When the protest songs and things like that started becoming, popular, and people began to express more than just love sentiments through music. They expressed more. They started talking about social things and things like that. I think that's when I started realizing it. That was really the most important thing for me. Later on, but in terms of music in general, as being a positive force in the world, I like to look at it from a kind of a, I don't know, without sounding too overblown, a cultural perspective. American music is probably the greatest export that the United States has ever given to the world. I mean, we've done a lot of good things, we've done a lot of bad things, but music has been nothing but positive, and it's changed. American popular music has really been probably the most important brand that America could possibly give the world. No one, it's never hurt anyone, and it's done all it's done is really change the culture of the entire Western world.
What was your greatest memory of that day of Live Aid with all those great artists coming together?
Oh, it was that we were headlining it. That was the crazy part. Considering there was Bob Dylan and Neil Young and and everybody you can imagine. We headlined it with Eddie, and we brought out Eddie Kendrick and David Ruffin, and we kind of reprised our Apollo Theater performance. And then we brought out Mick Jagger. Mick was doing a solo album at the time. He didn't have a band. He asked us to play to back him, which was really cool. And then he came out with Tina Turner and did that crazy bit that they did. And we played to close to 100,000 people. But even moreover, it was more important because I believe it was the first concert to ever be telecast around the world. And in this day and age, that seems like a non-event, but in those days, to be telecast around the world, a music event, was totally, groundbreaking. And here we were at the epicenter of this entire thing, and headlining that day. It was, what more can you say?
Incredible memory. It's the power of music. Now, I know you do the Aspen Songwriters Festival, and tell us about how that started and why it's so important to give back and help the songwriters and the new artists coming up.
Well, the old cliche, it all starts with a song, and that's the truth. The Aspen Songwriters Festival, I started that about 5 years ago, and we did 4 performances over three and a half years. It's been put on hiatus for a while. I haven't done it in a couple of years, but it was a chance for me to get back to the basics of songwriting and to showcase the difference between a song and a record. I think a lot of people don't make the distinction between a song and a record, and what I wanted to do is break it down and give the audience and the general public a chance to hear what a songwriter does, in its purest form. And in a way, it kind of, I brought songwriters out who had lots of recorded success with other artists, i.e. they wrote songs that had been recorded by other artists and had big #1 records. People might have been aware of the records and the record performed by a certain artist, but here's the actual songwriter who wrote that song now performing the original version of it. And that's what I tried to do with the Songwriter Festival, and it was great for me. I made a lot of new friends, a lot of people who I still hang out with and write with and perform with over the years, and so it was a great chance for me, and I think the audience really got a chance to experience something completely different.
And I know every song's probably different, but what is part of your songwriting technique? How do you capture the moment or get in the mood or find a collaborator? I know there's many varied angles to that, but what is your techniques to come up with some of your best songs?
Well, I think the best rule is no rules. You keep an open mind to anything, any possibility. And in terms of collaboration, in terms of initial inspiration, the inspiration can come from anywhere. It doesn't have to be profound. It can be something very mundane. But I think the difference between the average person and a person who writes songs is that a songwriter seems to be able to pluck those seemingly insignificant moments from the air and turn them into some sort of emotional reality, and that's the difference. You know, that's what songwriters do. And then they're able, you know, and the good ones can take a personal theme or something very personal, or on the other hand, something very universal and make it personal. And there's a lot, you know, there's a lot to be said for that, because, you know, you can sometimes speak for on a broader subject than might, you know, one might at first think you are. So it's just it's like a muscle in a way. You know, I think if I'm in the groove for songwriting, you know, it seems like it just flows. Sometimes when I'm doing a lot more live shows and I'm not writing so much, it takes a little while to get back into the writing mode. So I kind of liken it to you know, exercising a muscle. You know, when you're out of shape, it's hard to get started, but once you're in shape, it feels pretty good. You know.
And what do you look for in an ideal songwriting collaborator?
Someone who's open-minded and someone who wants to help you realize your ideas, and someone who hopefully will allow you to help them realize their ideas. It has to be, you know, it's like what actors talk about in that another actor is, you know, is giving or whatever, you know, kind of helping. You know, the worst collaborations are the ones where, you know, someone feels intimidated or someone feels proprietary about their ideas and doesn't want to, you know, isn't open to possibilities. You know, that usually leads to a very stifled collaborative effort. But if you're open and you don't feel intimidated, I think it's you know, that's really the core of where good collaboration comes from.
And with your special, Another Good Road, tell us how that, you know, all came together and what you're most proud of achieving with that.
I'm proud of getting it done. Well, what happened was I had released an album called Good Road to Follow, and it started out as a series of digital singles, and I compiled it into a 3-disc EP set. And I was really proud of the music. It was really wide-ranging. It covered a lot of musical territory, from folky to bluesy to rock and roll to R&B and everything in between, all mixed together. And I really wanted to get that music out there, and I knew that I wasn't going to tour a lot behind it. So I thought the best way to get that music out there is to go on television. So I gathered some friends who I play with and who I record with in Nashville, and we set out to do something really live and really very real. I wanted it to be totally real. I didn't want it to be a big production with a lot of, you know, production values and overdubs and fixes and all the, you know, all the technical tricks that you can do in this day and age. I just wanted to capture the moment, and so we did it all in one. It was about a 13-hour day. We did it with one camera, literally one camera, one cameraman, and we recorded in a recording studio that we made to look like kind of like a loungy kind of setting. And we literally played the song once or twice and said, okay, that's the take. And then we played it again just so the cameraman could get some different angles, and then we moved on. So each song we probably played 2 or 3 times, and we went right through the list. And then near the end of the day, the band went home, and I finished it out with the pedal steel player and the guitar player, and then finally by myself. And just, like I said, we didn't fix anything. All we did was mix it. So it is exactly what you see, is exactly happening, is exactly what it is.
Well, congratulations on that. Now, with all that you've seen, all that you've been through, obviously the music business has radically changed over the years, but what advice do you give to the young creative songwriter or artists or singers today to really hopefully find their own lane, their own voice?
Well, you know, I work with a lot of young artists, and I know how hard it is, how difficult it is to break through. My best advice is the same advice that I was given and that I learned years ago, was that study the people you like, try to emulate the people you like, and play live. Get out there in front of people, because it's the acid test. It's the way you can tell whether your songs are connecting. It's a way you can tell whether your live performance is moving people. It's really the only way to do it. So the rules haven't really changed over the years. It's just that the arena has, you know, gotten a lot more gotten larger and more difficult, and there was more clutter, So.
Well, John, I know you've accomplished so much. The #1 selling duo in history. With Daryl, you've had 6 #1 singles, 7 platinum, 6 gold albums. You've got so many Grammys and American Music Awards, the Songwriters Hall of Fame, and last year you were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Looking back over it all, what are you most proud of?
Being alive to tell the tale. Truthfully. But I would say that if I had, if you're talking about just the accolades and all the awards and that kind of stuff, and by the way, I don't mean to correct you, but we've never won a Grammy, so just so you know.
Nomination.
So I guess
that's enough.
Bucket list. I would have to say the induction into the American Songwriters Hall of Fame was the most important to me, because when I look back on it, even the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we would not have been inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame if we hadn't written the songs we wrote. So to me, here again, it goes back to the song where it all starts. And to be in the same company and to be mentioned in the same breath as George Gershwin and Cole Porter and, and all the incredible brill-building songwriters, Lieber and Stoller and on and on and on. To be included in that elite group of songwriters is a major accomplishment. And to me, probably that's the most important thing to me.
Well, congratulations again on the another good road and so much coming. We can't wait for seeing you guys on the road and your next song. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks. That was a good interview. Appreciate it, man.